So we said that works of art didn't have to have utilitarian purpose. Another thing that comes up in the act of creation is this idea of process. Yeah, we are. We could teach, probably any art form. We could do an entire course on process within that art form and the various processes that artists use to develop and transform materials. So just in a basic way, I just want to touch on these ideas that the biggest thing to know about art for me in creation, it's form building. That's what the artist is doing, is building forms, whether those forms are fabrics coming together, creating larger forms, different forms, whether that's movements that come together, whether it's brush strokes, whether it's carving the stone, chipping the stone away, carving it to create these forms and shape. Art is a form building activity. I think that's true of all of our art forms. Artists are building forms that ultimately house feeling. Yeah, that's what Langer was talking about in her definition. Yeah. Now, what an artist does in a process is they take the materials, and you think about what the materials of your art form are. Yeah, they combine them and they create larger materials. They either, during a playing time with the materials, they come up with the conception and a concept of what the work would be, or they do that before they start. That somehow they get an idea, like, I want to make this. I look at that. Now, sometimes an artist can start here and they can start chipping away, and then they can suddenly find the dragon and the bird within this. Or sometimes they know before, this is what I want to do with this, is I want to find that. Ultimately, they develop a process, a series of steps that they're going to go through to get the product, to get to the finish line, to get to the artifact. Yeah? They will transform the content into the forms, and ultimately, often the forms have some kind of symbolic representation to them. Yeah, or they can even be symbolically in an abstract way. Yeah, there's still something in that, and they're infused with feelings. Yeah. Now, in a process, sometimes the artist will get to what they wanted to get to because they were so strongly committed to their concept that they knew it was going to be this. But often, most artists will look at the end result and say, I made some choices along the way that made this happen. And the end result is the artifact. Or it's a dance, which is a painting, a sculpture, a piece of music, a play, a costume, a scenic design, a film. It's any of those things. Yeah. So, and as Clive Bell says, when it's great, it's even better than the sum of the parts. We no longer just look at it as stone and, as stone, but we see so many other things within this work. Yeah. And that's, again, process. How did we start from blank sheet of paper and then finally get to artifact? Now, key to creativity is imagination and invention. A big thing is being able to see possibility, and even with things that are somewhat ordinary, being able to see something new in a representation with that. Yeah. This is John Hospers, who is a philosopher, and he described creativity, and I like his definition here quite a bit. He said it's an activity that's distinctly that is clearly distinct from merely following rules. It's an activity that is neither programmed nor programmable. You don't know when you begin the activity what the end product will be. That is so often the case for many artists, that even if they have a conception, I need to make a dress for Lady Macbeth, the end result might be somewhat different than the original idea and even the original rendering as it gets through that process. I like this idea of John Hosper's that we can't program it. And that's one of the things that we like about it, is that it's not a programmable thing. It's not a recipe that we just go from A to B to C to D and then suddenly we have, something. That might be something we made. Michelangelo said this, and it's quite a beautiful statement, that he said the best artist has no concept what some single marble does enclose within its mass, but only the hand which obeys the intelligence can accomplish that. Taking away brings out the living figure in alpine and hard stone, which grows the more the stone is chipped away. Yeah, that's a great idea. And Michelangelo would say, he once said, what I'm trying to do is free the figure that's already inside there. I'm trying to find it and just set it free from the rock, and that process of chipping away will allow the figure to emerge. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Often also artists don't know the number of steps. Sometimes we're defined by the amount of time we have, like, oh, I have 12 weeks to make a dance, I have 5 weeks, I've got so many rehearsals. So we have confines of practical things that we have to deal with, but a lot of times the number of steps we don't know. And what's interesting as an artist is that I can make this piece, but the next time I make the next piece, my process can be different and all the rules are different. It just really depends on it. I don't often follow these same steps, even though there are some things that we do happen upon that are part of technique, that we tend to do this way. The number of steps are different. And this is Ram Har. He's great because he believed that creativity was in our ability to see when things are starting to work and happen, even before they're happening, and to let that happen and survive. So in some ways, he takes a very evolutionary idea about creativity, that everything can be happening with our movement, and then suddenly we see this little thing happening over here and we like it, and we grow it, and we let that survive and that take over. Yeah. And so suddenly a dance that could have been all of these possibilities steers itself towards this one that had great potential in its ability. So he would say that the artist, the choreographer, the director, the designer, that person can see when something is happening, and that's interesting. What is creativity? Now, again, we could teach a whole course on creativity. It'd be a fun course. I'd love to take that course from some great many people on what they thought creativity was. For me, there's a couple things, like, let's just hit this real quickly. But creativity is about seeing that possibility. And we see it through technique. We're going to circle to what technique is. Our technical abilities allow us to see possibility. And through process and through practice makes perfect. So we have to practice. We learn how to bring materials together to create these expressive forms that end up being successful. Yeah. The doing is important. Doing is important to creativity, because if we didn't create something, we're only imagining. It's only becomes imagination and daydreaming. Yeah. So part of this creativity was in making an artifact, not just in imagining what this stone could be. It was getting through the process. And this artist's technique allowed them to carve this jade into these forms that became symbolically important. And so much so that we could look at the form and see an entire dynasty within this shape.